Hello lovely friends, how are you all doing today? I hope you're well. I'm following on straight from having just filmed the tour. Still a little bit chilly out there. It's gradually warming up a bit. Not too bright. Anyway, it's the perfect day for getting a bit of physical, which is what I'm hoping to do as this, actually I think we're approaching noon, as this morning/afternoon session in the garden goes on. And it's what I was sort of saying at the end of that video, that there are still a few jobs to do. Not too many, but I'm glad that there are still a few jobs to do, because I think it's really easy, well it certainly is for me, at this time of year when it's getting a bit chilly, a bit damp, my bones don't like it, it's all too easy for me to get really cosy and hunkered down indoors. And frankly, become a bit of a hermit. I would quite happily close my front door now and not re-emerge until March. And I don't think that's good for mental health, is it? So yeah, I'm glad that there are a few jobs still to do. And then of course, even when I get to the end of my jobs list, I'll try and invent a few more. But even when my jobs are done, I'll still be popping down to the garden from time to time for a bit of harvesting, for some kitty cuddles if they're around. They're around much less in the winter. Anyway, so yes, I'm glad. I'm glad of some jobs to do. I'm glad I'm not turning into a hermit just yet. Now, before we go out there, I'm going to look after my brassicas today. But again, I was mentioning this in the tour video. I was talking about the 5 squash beds which still need to be covered. The matter on the top needs to be chopped up a bit. You saw that the nasturtiums were massively wilted by last night's frost, and they're dead now, basically. So there's those 5 beds left to do. And I was thinking about it the other day, because the 3 horizontal squash beds in my main bed number 4, that's the last bed before the cold frame, the bed that's got the rose bush at the back end of it. Those 3 beds, remembering back to spring, were the last 3 beds that I was prepping for planting. And they were an absolute nightmare. An absolute nightmare to... I mean, I could barely get my fork in. There were just these huge, like boulders. Couldn't plant anything into it. And I was persevering with one bed, just trying to bash the boulders down a bit smaller. It was really discouraging. Now the thing is, that bed is the last bed that I ever cultivated, if you like. So from getting the plot to the stage it's at now in terms of cutting out those 4 main beds, excuse me, that was the last bed I ever sort of removed the turf from. Well, I say turf, grass, weeds, brambles, some random raspberry runners, all sorts. It was the hardest bed to clear. But yeah, I got it cleared about, I think it was about 5 years ago, might be 6 years ago. I got it sort of semi-cleared. And then that year I just covered the whole bed in squash plants. The hope was that, as obviously with all that foliage, they'd suppress any weeds with, the newly exposed soil, what have you. But it's always been the trickiest bed of all 4 of my beds, because I'm on a slight slope, so that bed does get wetter than the others. And I think it's just the fact that over the years it's had less sort of organic matter, mulch, whatever, added to it, just because it's been open and worked for less years. Makes sense. So they were an absolute pickle this spring to prepare, and I gave up, which I've never done before, but I did this year. I just thought, this is breaking me. I can't do it. It's not worth it. And I had originally planned to have my squash teepees in that bed. I couldn't even get the sort of the wooden, all my wooden stake support things in. I couldn't get them in the ground, so I thought, right, just put those in the next bed over. Like, change your plan, grow horizontal squash. And it was basically a matter of just dig a hole to put the plant in and forget the rest of the bed. So that was my kind of change of plan. Plus, of course, we were given the horse manure. Well, not given, we bought it. And those 3 beds and then a little bit in the next bed over, I covered with the horse poo. I didn't dig it in. I didn't do it. I mean, I just couldn't. Those beds, can't dig them. So I sort of spread it out on the top, then covered the whole lot with cardboard. Again, sort of suppress weeds, moisture retention, what have you. Got little holes in the cardboard, a little space to put the plant and the water bottle for watering to the roots. So those beds are untouched. And this is what I'm wondering is for this winter coming, I'm going to experiment, and I hope I'm not going to rue the day. I'm not going to even try to turn that manure in. I might have a look. 'Cause I'm going to get am I getting my fork out today? I don't think I was planning to, but I might have a little look, give a little fork, see how they are. But what I'm hoping is that over the course of the summer, we've had a lot of rain, softens things a bit, all that manure. I'm hoping like there might have been some worm activity. A lot of the cardboard on the top has been chewed, it's composted down, what have you. My thought for this winter is to just cover them. Don't try and dig them. I haven't got any more compost to add on the top. I might try and see if I can find some sort of mulch to put on the top, but just leave them and see if next spring they're any easier. I might be making a rod for my own back doing that. We'll see. But the other thing that occurred to me in main bed 3 and main bed 4, in main bed 4 in particular, the grass in my paths, in my little mud dirt paths, was awful this year. I've never had weeds like it. And I kept sort of saying to myself, well, you haven't been here, you haven't done any weeding. And it's true, I haven't done any weeding this year at all until just now to clear the paths. But even so, I just thought, this is like just masses and masses of grass. And it suddenly occurred to me, I wonder where the horse muck was on those 3 beds before I got it all covered and got growing in the beds, whether, because it was quite dry at that point, whether some of, basically I'm wondering whether there's a load of grass seed in that horse muck, and a bit of a gentle breeze, it's blown off the beds, it's landed on the paths. I've covered the beds and that has suppressed anything growing all summer. Obviously then the squash covered them. But yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if I've had the most dreadful weeds this year, partly because like I said, in beds 1 and 2, it wasn't half as bad. It wasn't anywhere near as bad. And I just can't understand why suddenly this year the weeds were so bad. Because this is the other thing, in my actual beds, in the growing beds, very few weeds. I've been really careful over the years to weed carefully, getting roots out, what have you. And as each year has gone on, my time spent weeding has got less and less and less. I mean, I do so little weeding these days. Well, this year, none at all. Anyway, so yeah, that's 2 thoughts about those horse poo beds. 1, is that what gave me all the grass seed weeds? And 2, what do I do this winter? Do I just cover them now? Do I try and turn some of that muck in? Because next year, 2 of those beds will be for potatoes. So I will need to get my fork in order to get my seed potato tubers down far enough to get a decent harvest. Do you know what? I tell you what, now that Rusty's finally got off the daybed again, I'll grab my fork. Let's go out and stick my fork in and just see what's what. See if it's changed at all in the course of, I think it's March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. In the course of 8 months of having that horse mark and cardboard on the top, let's see if it's made any difference. Of the 3 of these mini beds within bed number 4, this one was the worst. I call this bed 4C. The kale is in 4A, the coco de pampol were in 4B, I'm in 4C. So, I think, let's have a look. I can see from the 2 watering bottles. That was where I did my 2 little planting holes. So this bit in the middle didn't get touched this spring. Let's hang on a tick. So now, bear in mind, where are we? Beginning of November, we've had a really, really wet October. Some of the cardboard has disintegrated. Obviously, the plant material has died back. So in the last 2 weeks in particular, when we've had a lot of rain, this has been a bit exposed. Let's see how it's looking. Sorry, worms. Let me bring you in a bit closer. I've just brought you along a little bit further. A second ago I put the fork in there. I don't want to fork it too much. So let's just have a look here, because there's the water bottle, there's the planting hole. This bit was also not dug. I mean, it was, when I say not dug, I put my fork in there and just sort of levered it a little bit. And you can see, probably you can see there's remnants of that, the horse muck there. Oh, that's feeling pretty solid. Oh yeah, now, ton of worms. So what I'm thinking, oh la la, sorry little worms, I'm not going to bash them anymore. I can feel it's really solid and compact still down there. Now, for this bed next year, what will be growing here? I've got to think about the rotation. This next year will be chard, beetroot, salad leaves and some peppers. And you can see, I mean, I can't sow salad seeds, lettuce seeds into that. It just won't do anything. However, I don't think I'm going to gain anything for next year by digging this bed now. So I think I will go with my thought of crop and drop him, chop and drop him, get him covered, leave him alone, and hopefully, you know, through the course of the winter, the worms that are in there can break it up a little bit more for me. Oh, I'm making a rod for my own back if I don't do an autumn dig. Yeah, I think I'm going to just leave it alone. But it is disappointingly really solid still. I mean, the only reason I can get the fork in at all is because it's wet. If in the early spring next year, if we had a prolonged period of dry, warm weather, I wouldn't even be able to get my fork in that. That would just be like concrete. But yeah. Oh, I'm so undecided whether to just turn this horse muck in a little bit. I'll have a think on it. haven't I? I'm suddenly, I don't know why, I'm suddenly really short on shorter, sturdy poles and sticks and things. Oh, I seem to have lost a load of these metal ones. So crazy, I think what I'm going to have to do for the purple sprouting, I think I'm going to have to get my 8-foot bean canes out that I use for my tomatoes. Oh, la, la. Because they're the newest of all my canes, they're the strongest. I mean, it's going to look crazy, 8-foot poles, but, you know, hopefully I can get about a foot of it into below the ground. So there'll be 7 foot sticking out, and hopefully by next March, the purple sprout and broccoli will be sort of almost hip height, 3 foot high. It's, get in. Oh. I'm getting all the stakes in first, and then once they're all in, I'll go around later with my string to tie things in. But this thing with the sticks and stakes, it reminds me of a job that, it's one of those jobs I think of quite often and then just like instantly forget. I've got a sort of basket full of rubbishy sticks ranging from 2 foot to 6 foot outside the shed. I think the vast majority of them are goners, but I've been meaning to sort through and test them and for ages, so I think I'll do that in my next session. I have a bit of a sort out. And then, you know, it's a good thing to do now as well, because if folk are having, you know, trees, basically what it means is if I can become aware right now of what I'm lacking in terms of sticks, supports, what have you, I can start now to keep an eye out in skips, bins, in the park, if a tree comes down, whatever, I can start looking out now to hopefully collect a few things before next April, May, June, before the next big season starts. I can gather a bit of new kit together by way of free stuff. Tomato poles are going to look ridiculous, but it's all I've got. Let's get them in. Job done. Now, I'm aware that looks completely mad, bonkers and over the top. Oh my goodness, such big poles for, at the moment, still little plants. They're only about a foot and a half tall. But I've done it for 2 reasons. Firstly, as I was saying earlier, brassicas really, really hate windrock. Let me show you an example of what has happened just in about, I think, the last 10 days, 2 weeks or so, since I took the nets off. This should show you really clearly. This plant started here, and you can see with windrock waggling backwards and forwards, and it was starting to lay over here. Now bear in mind, when I planted them all, firstly I planted them a bit deeper, and secondly I really, really, really firmed them in. You'll always hear gardeners talking about really firming their brassicas in, but despite all that firming, oh my goodness, that you can see it here as well. You see where it's rocked that hole. That's another one. I'll firm that soil back down again. Yeah, you'll always hear gardeners talking about really, really firming brassicas in. So, like I was saying, they hate windrock. That windrock, that wiggling around in their little holes down there, it's going to stress them a bit, and, you know, it may mean that they're not as productive, they don't grow as well as they could do. So by giving them these really, really solid supports, hopefully now the plants can just get on with growing and be happy. But the other reason for doing it is, I mean, it's more visible in the Cabbages. I haven't got any sticks for these yet. I need to sort that out still. But not so much with the Cabbages because they won't get much taller. But coming back to, say, the purple sprouting broccoli or the Cavallo Nero just next to me, some of these, I mean this one, hello cheeky, it's 4 foot tall already. If I didn't stake them, what would happen is eventually they'd just be growing horizontally on the ground. Firstly, that that kind of denies me access to this path, and it makes harvesting that much more tricky. But also because with all of them I eat the leaves as well as the sprouting parts. If they're on the ground like that and we're wet, they could just rot before I've had a chance to harvest and scoff. So yeah, stop them rocking around, stop them flopping on the floor and rotting, and make my harvesting life much easier. Nice clear path for harvesting. Nice clear path for harvesting. Good. Right, now the next job is... the next job is to... It's so tall, that one. Oh my goodness. This little yogurt pot that's up there now, it was down there at the end of September. It's had to grow. The next job now is to get down to the compost bin, the square bin, to empty it and use the contents to mulch. I think what I'm going to do with, there won't be a huge amount, I'm going to mulch those kale because they're really quite exposed, and the Cavallo Nero because that ground is really quite exposed. I don't think I'll have enough to then mulch the purple sprouting, the Cabbages or the broccoli. However, I am going to be doing some mowing at the weekend, so hopefully I can get some grass clippings for those. But yeah, we'll grab the compost out for the kale and Cavallo Nero. Yay, good stuff. These jobs, they're keeping me warm on a chilly, very damp day. The emptyings of that compost bin, well, they didn't go quite as far as I'd hoped. I've put a load in there just because that's bare of plants. Likewise, just here where it's a bit more exposed. And then, of course, over there on the Cavallo Neros. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I literally compost everything that's compostable. And then you come to spread it out, and there's not a lot. I mean, I've put it on here really quite thickly, and you can see some of it is barely composted. Lots of pods from bean podding, and then other bits are a bit better composted. But two things, it's going to act as a bit of a mulch, a little bit of protection from the worst of the winter rain. And of course it's going to feed the soil. And then come the spring, you can see I always end up with these sort of slightly drier twiggy bits. They can all have a bit of a tickle in. And that's all kind of helping to break up my heavy, compact clay soil. Whew. I tell you, my goodness, listen to those magpies. Such a chilly day today. It's rather lovely though. It's the first proper chilly one we've had, well, since back in, was it February, March or so? Lots of food still to come. And still, can you hear all those magpies? They're mad, those magpies. Yeah, lots of food to come. A few more jobs to do. But I'm happy. I'm happy with the way it's looking at this stage, at this time in the year. And as for the squash beds that had the horse muck, yeah, I mean, you know what I might do? Because I'm in a dilemma about not turning the horse muck in, but just covering it and leaving it another winter, what I might do is I might do one bed with the muck turned in, one bed or 2 beds left completely alone, to see what difference that might make next spring. Goodness me, it's got a bit noisy. Yeah, sorry about that. Why am I apologising for the magpies being noisy? And as I was mentioning, these 2 beds will become main crop potatoes and summer salad potatoes next year. So they will be dug anyway in order for me to get the spuds in. So what I think I'll do is I'll leave these 2, because I will have to dig them in the spring anyway, whatever happens. Leave these 2 alone, just cover them. Give this one a tickle, so all that material that's still on the top, just turn it in a few inches or so. Yay, good. I like a plan. Crazy birds. They're all up on the, they're up in those trees and on the TV aerials on the tops of houses. What a squawking racket. I wonder what set them off. Oh, that's beginning to be a wintry sky, isn't it? Alright, my lovelies, I'm going to wrap things up. It's been a lovely little sesh this kind of morning lunchtime. Get our little tour done, as you'll see in the previous video, and just do these brassica cares. It's one of those things where I'll rest easy now, because I know I've taken care of my plants, I've given them the best possible conditions, great. The other thing I can think about doing for the brassicas, I'm going to have to order some more, is a top dressing of chicken manure pellets, because how long have things been in? End of August, September, October. Actually, they've only been in a couple of months, but it is something I can think about over the winter, is a little top dressing of chicken manure pellets, because all of my brassicas are follow-ons from something else I've grown in that bed this year. When I took out the previous crop, I will have prepped that bed by giving it a bit of chicken poo, so that it did have that bit added months ago. But yeah, they'll be in there for quite a long time, so it's something to think about. Maybe a little top dressing, mulch, definitely. And it occurs to me a couple of good things have come out of chatting today, and it's all about the frugal gardener, is that thing about my sticks and poles and needing some more. It is a good idea, especially if your garden is going to be, like, you know, pretty much shut for the next few months, is to have a little inventory of all your kit, and maybe think back to the summer or the autumn to think, what was I short of? And I know we did the tool videos and talked about, you know, Christmas gifting to each other, if your families do gifting. But actually, you know, things like this, sticks, mulch, all those things, it's a really good reminder that kind of keep on top of, aware of what you need in the garden. Just always have that little mental note of it, so that as you're out and about, you can always keep your eyes peeled and hopefully make the most of an opportunity which presents itself. That opportunity won't present itself, even if it's there, if you haven't clocked that you need that opportunity, if that makes sense. So both in terms of the poles, yes, clocked, I need to make the most of any opportunity, but also compost, mulch, that's always, always, always on my agenda. But when we get to this time of the year, now that I've cropped and dropped all the plant material, I've emptied whatever little bits of compost that I had left, it's all in the garden now. There's nothing in the compost bins, that's it. And I won't really be making, I mean, hardly any compost over the winter. With most of my vegetables, I don't peel them, I eat the skins, so there's very, very, very little by way of kitchen scraps. But I will keep an eye out for anything I can compost, and specifically mulch. So we get to this time of year, we're talking about the very last grass mowings of the year, whether it's here on site when I do my community bit, or whether it's in the local park out there, if they cut that grass one more time. I don't know whether they will at this time of year, but certainly leaves, leaves, leaves. It's all about the leaves, about the leaves, about the leaves. It's going to all be about the leaves now for the next couple of months. So, good. Identify gaps, log it, keep an eye out as you're out and about, and hopefully you can scrounge for nothing the things you need. It's getting really chilly. I need to go home and, soup. What do I fancy today? I'm still loving my courgette and potato soup. Oh, you know what we're getting to the time of year for? Curried parsnip soup. Yum, yum, yum. Do I dig up a parsnip before I go home? No, I'm going to wait. I've got plenty of veggies at home. And that's the other thing with the parsnips, they'll keep in the ground. I don't need to have them out. I should use up stuff that I've already harvested. Anyway, enough of that waffle. I will see you all again really soon, I hope. What's next on the agenda? Got a few ideas. So whenever I see you next, I will see you then. And in the meantime, please look after yourselves and each other. And do try and get some outside time whenever you can. And don't be a hermit. Cheerio.